I'd led covert operations across 4 continents and earned the silent gratitude of 3 presidents. But sitting at my stepmother's pristine dining table while my half-brother mocked my dead-end security job felt like the most dangerous mission of my life. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The Blackwood family estate sprawled across 12 manicured acres in Greenwich, Connecticut, where old money whispered through perfectly trimmed hedges and success was measured in generations rather than achievements. Tonight, the dining room glowed under a crystal chandelier that cost more than most people's cars, casting warm light across faces that had never questioned their place in the world. My father, William Blackwood III, sat at the head of the mahogany table, his silver hair perfectly styled, his navy blazer bearing the subtle pins of exclusive clubs I'd never been invited to join. At 68, he commanded respect through presence alone, the kind of man who could silence a boardroom with a raised eyebrow. To his right sat Vivian, my stepmother of 15 years, elegant in pearls and practiced smiles, her blonde hair swept into a chignon that hadn't moved despite the evening breeze from the open terrace doors. My half-brother Marcus occupied the chair across from me, 28 years old, and radiating the confidence of someone who'd never failed at anything that mattered to the family. Fresh from his promotion to senior associate at Blackwood & Associates, the investment firm our father had built from his grandfather's modest brokerage, Marcus wore success like cologne, expensive and impossible to ignore. "So Alex," Vivian said, her voice carrying that particular tone wealthy women used when discussing charity cases, "how are things at the security company?" She pronounced security company the way others might say sewage treatment plant, her smile never wavering but her eyes flickering with something between pity and distaste. "It's fine," I replied, cutting my steak into precise pieces. "Steady work." Marcus laughed, the sound sharp against his wine glass. "Steady work. That's one way to put it. Standing around office buildings all night, making sure nobody steals the coffee makers." "Marcus," my father said mildly, though his tone carried more amusement than rebuke. "What?" "I'm just saying, Alex has been finding himself for 8 years now? At some point, don't you think it's time to actually find something worth looking for?" I set down my fork carefully. The dining room felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in with their museum-quality paintings and family portraits that stopped including me after my mother died when I was 16. "Not everyone can inherit their career path," I said quietly. "Inherit?" Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "I graduated summa cum laude from Wharton, Alex. I earned my position." "Of course you did." "Boys," Vivian interjected, her hostess training kicking in before the conversation could turn truly uncomfortable. "This is supposed to be a celebration. Marcus just closed the Henderson account." My father nodded approvingly. $300 million in assets under management. "Well done." Marcus preened under the praise, straightening his tie. "Just wait until you see the quarterly projections. With the Henderson portfolio and the new municipal bonds strategy, we're looking at record profits." "That's wonderful, dear," Vivian said, then turned to me with that practiced concern. "Alex, have you given any more thought to what we discussed? About perhaps exploring opportunities with the firm? I'm sure your father could find something suitable." The offer hung in the air like smoke. We all knew what something suitable meant. An entry-level position, probably in the mailroom or filing department, where the family could keep an eye on me while I learned to be grateful for their charity. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I'm committed to my current position." Marcus snorted. "Committed to what? Walking around empty buildings with a flashlight? Christ, Alex, you're 34 years old. Don't you want to accomplish something meaningful with your life?" "Marcus." My father's voice carried a warning now, but it was directed at his tone, not his sentiment. "No, it's fine," I said, though my jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. Marcus has a point. What could be more meaningful than following in the family footsteps, making rich people richer, while pretending it's some kind of noble calling? The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. My father set down his wine glass with deliberate care. "Alexander, I think you're forgetting that the rich people we serve include pension funds, charities, and university endowments. We help teachers retire with dignity and fund scholarships for students who otherwise couldn't afford college. And you take your percentage off the top. We provide a service and charge accordingly. That's how business works. Vivian cleared her throat delicately. Perhaps we should change the subject. Alex, how is that little apartment of yours? Still in Queens? The geography carried its own judgment. Greenwich to Queens might as well have been Greenwich to Bangladesh in Vivian's world. Astoria, I corrected. And it's fine, close to work. Which security company is it again? She asked. I don't think you've ever mentioned the name. Because I couldn't. Because Sentinel Strategic Solutions didn't officially exist, and if it did, it certainly didn't guard office buildings. Because my apartment in Astoria was 2 blocks from a safe house and 3 miles from a federal facility that didn't appear on any maps. It's a consulting firm, I said instead. Risk assessment, threat analysis. Marcus rolled his eyes. That sounds like a fancy way of saying security guard with a college degree. I didn't graduate college. The admission dropped into the conversation like a stone into still water. Marcus stared at me, then at our father, then back at me. You didn't, what? But Dad said you went to school in California. I had gone to school in California. The U.S. Army Intelligence Center at Fort Huachuca, followed by specialized training at facilities whose names I couldn't mention to civilians. But that was a different kind of education than what the Blackwood family valued. I enlisted instead, I said simply. Enlisted? Vivian's voice pitched higher. You mean the military? Army. 8 years. My father's face had gone carefully neutral, the expression he wore during difficult negotiations. You never mentioned that. Because you never asked. Because after Mom died, and you remarried 6 months later, our conversations became limited to holiday phone calls and awkward dinners like this one. Because when I came back from my first deployment and tried to tell you about it, you changed the subject to Marcus's prep school grades. It didn't seem relevant, I said instead. 8 years, Marcus repeated slowly. What did you do? Drive trucks? The question stung more than he probably intended. In Marcus's world, military service was something other people's children did. The kids who couldn't get into good colleges, or whose families couldn't afford them. Various things. Various things like what? Come on, Alex, don't be so mysterious. What was your rank? Where were you stationed? Before I could answer, the doorbell chimed. Vivian frowned. They weren't expecting anyone, and the Blackwood estate didn't get casual drop-ins. I'll get it, she said, rising gracefully from her chair. We heard voices in the foyer, too distant to make out words but carrying the tone of surprise and urgent conversation. A moment later, Vivian returned with a man I'd never seen before. He was perhaps 50, with iron gray hair and the kind of posture that screamed military even in his expensive civilian suit. His eyes swept the room with professional assessment before settling on my father. Mr. Blackwood, I'm sorry to interrupt your evening. I'm Colonel James Morrison, United States Army. I believe you handle investments for the Morrison Family Trust. My father stood, extending his hand. Of course, Colonel Morrison, please join us, though I have to say I wasn't expecting. Colonel Morrison's gaze had shifted to me and his expression changed entirely. His spine straightened, his chin lifted slightly, and when he spoke, his voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. General Richardson, it wasn't a question. It's an honor, sir. The words hit the dining room like a physical force. Wine glasses stopped halfway to lips, forks froze mid-bite. Even the candle flames seemed to flicker in response. Marcus's mouth actually fell open. General? A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. Colonel Morrison's eyes never left mine. I apologize for the interruption, sir, but when Mr. Blackwood mentioned he had family visiting, he executed a crisp nod that was somehow more formal than a salute. Welcome home, General. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the antique clock ticking in the hallway. My father's face had gone pale, Vivian gripped her napkin like a lifeline, and Marcus looked like someone had just told him the laws of physics had been suspended. General Richardson? My father repeated slowly. as if testing the words in a foreign language. Colonel Morrison glanced around the table, clearly sensing the tension but misunderstanding its source. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Are you not aware of the General's service record?" "Service record?" Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. The Colonel's expression shifted to confusion, then something approaching concern. "Sir, perhaps I should." "It's fine, Colonel," I said quietly, standing from my chair. The movement felt automatic, muscle memory from years of formal interactions. "These are family, they're cleared for general information." It was a lie, they weren't cleared for anything. But Colonel Morrison nodded as if it made perfect sense. "Of course, sir. Well, Mr. Blackwood, you should be very proud. Your son is something of a legend in certain circles. 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, 1 classified operation I can't discuss. The youngest colonel in his battalion, promoted to brigadier general after—" He paused, glancing at the family. "After distinguished service in situations that will probably remain classified for the next 30 years. Marcus was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Brigadier General? Alex is a brigadier general?" "Actually," Colonel Morrison corrected with a slight smile, "he's been promoted since then. Major General Richardson is currently on extended leave but technically still active duty." "Major General." The words seemed to echo in the crystal and silver silence of the Blackwood dining room. My father slowly sank back into his chair. "Major General Alexander Richardson." "Yes, sir, though I understand he's been keeping a low profile lately. Can't say I blame him, after what happened in Kabul." "What happened in Kabul?" Vivian asked faintly. Colonel Morrison looked at me, seeking permission. I nodded slightly. "The general saved 14 American civilians and 32 Afghan nationals during the embassy evacuation. Single-handedly held a checkpoint against insurgent forces for 6 hours while coordinating air support." His voice carried genuine admiration. "They wanted to give him the Medal of Honor, but the operation was classified, so he received the Distinguished Service Cross instead." Quietly. The dining room had become a museum of shock. Marcus's wine glass sat forgotten in his hand, red liquid threatening to spill. Vivian had gone so pale her makeup stood out like paint on porcelain. And my father was looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time in decades. "Alex," he said slowly, "you're a major general in the United States Army." "On leave," I corrected automatically. "But you work security." "I do consulting work for various agencies while I decide whether to accept my next assignment." The words came out clipped, professional. "The Pentagon has been patient, but they need an answer soon." Colonel Morrison nodded. "The general has been offered command of the Army Intelligence Center. It's quite an honor. He'd be the youngest officer to hold that position in modern history." "Army Intelligence," Marcus repeated numbly. Not driving trucks." "No, sir," Colonel Morrison said with a slight chuckle. "Though I'm sure the general could drive a truck if needed. He's qualified to do pretty much everything." I remained standing, feeling exposed under their stares. This wasn't how I'd wanted them to find out. I'd planned to tell them eventually, when the timing was right, when I could control the narrative. Instead, my cover had been blown by a chance encounter with a family client, who happened to know my real identity. "Colonel Morrison," I said formally, "thank you for the kind words. If you need to discuss business with my father, perhaps we should step into his study." "Actually, sir, the business can wait. I just wanted to pay my respects. Your reputation precedes you in military circles." He turned to my father. "Mr. Blackwood, you raised an exceptional man. The Army doesn't give out stars lightly, especially not to someone his age." My father nodded mutely, still processing the information. Colonel Morrison straightened. "I should let you return to your family dinner. General, if you need anything during your leave, please don't hesitate to contact me. And sir?" He paused at the dining room entrance. "For what it's worth, whatever decision you make about the Intelligence Center, the Army is better for having officers like you." He disappeared into the foyer with Vivian, leaving behind a silence that felt like the aftermath of an explosion. Through the windows, I could see his black sedan pulling away from the circular drive, taking with it any possibility of returning to the quiet anonymity I'd maintained for the past 6 months. Marcus was the first to break the silence. Holy shit, Alex, you're a fucking general. Language, my father said automatically, then shook his head. I'm sorry, this is a lot to process. I sat back down, though every instinct told me to leave, to retreat to the safety of my anonymous apartment, where no one expected me to be anything more than a man who worked nights and kept to himself. Why didn't you tell us? Vivian asked, returning from walking Colonel Morrison out. Her composure had cracked slightly, revealing something that might have been genuine emotion beneath the social polish. Would it have mattered? The question hung between us like an accusation. Because we all knew the answer, it would have mattered enormously. It would have changed everything. The way they spoke to me, the way they included me in family discussions, the way they introduced me to their friends. It would have transformed me from the family disappointment into the family hero overnight. And that was exactly why I hadn't told them. Of course it would have mattered, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. Why? Because a major general sounds more impressive than a security guard? Because a decorated war hero fits better at your country club dinner parties than a washout son who couldn't cut it in the real world? That's not fair, Alex. Isn't it? 5 minutes ago, Marcus was lecturing me about accomplishing something meaningful with my life. You were offering me charity jobs in the mailroom. Vivian was asking about my quote, little apartment, like I was some kind of social experiment you were all too polite to abandon. The accusations hit their marks. Marcus had the grace to look ashamed. Vivian studied her hands. My father cleared his throat. You're right, he said quietly. I made assumptions. I judged you without knowing the facts. You judged me based on what you could see and understand. That's human nature. But it's also why I couldn't tell you. I don't understand. I pushed back from the table, suddenly exhausted by the weight of pretending to be normal, of sitting in a civilian dining room discussing civilian concerns when part of my mind was still calculating exit routes and threat assessments. Because the moment you know what I really do, who I really am, you stop seeing me as your son and start seeing me as a symbol, the war hero, the decorated officer, the family success story you can brag about at the country club. Would that be so terrible? Vivian asked softly. Yes. Because none of you would have cared about me if I'd stayed a security guard forever. And I needed to know that the people who claimed to love me could love me even when they thought I was worthless. The words left a bitter taste in my mouth, but they were true. For 6 months I'd been testing them, seeing if their affection was conditional on their perception of my success. Tonight had provided my answer. Marcus set down his wine glass with trembling hands. Alex, Jesus, I'm sorry, I had no idea. You had exactly the idea I wanted you to have. But why? Why would you want us to think less of you? I looked around the dining room, at the portraits of successful Blackwood men, spanning 4 generations, at the silver and crystal that represented centuries of accumulated wealth and influence, at the faces of people who had never questioned whether they deserved their comfortable lives. Because I needed to know whether I belonged here as myself, or just as another trophy for the family collection. The uncomfortable silence stretched through the following morning like fog across the Connecticut countryside. I'd stayed the night in my old bedroom, unchanged since I was 17, still decorated with high school baseball trophies and college pennants from schools I'd never attended. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sleeping surrounded by symbols of a normal life I'd never lived while my real achievements remained locked away in classified files. My phone buzzed at 0630 hours. Old habits died hard. I still thought in military time, still woke before dawn, still felt the phantom weight of gear that hadn't hung on my shoulders for 6 months. The text was from a number I didn't recognize. Saw the news about Colonel Morrison's visit. We need to talk. Coffee shop on Putnam Avenue 0800. Come alone. Nias K. Only one person in my life signed messages with just K. Catherine Walsh, my former intelligence liaison. A woman who could disappear into any crowd and emerge with information that officially didn't exist. If she was reaching out, it meant my carefully constructed anonymity had just evaporated. I dressed quickly in civilian clothes, jeans, navy sweater, leather jacket, the uniform of a man trying to blend in. Downstairs, the kitchen was empty except for Maria. the housekeeper who'd worked for the family since before my mother died. She looked up from preparing breakfast with eyes that held more warmth than I'd felt from my actual relatives in years. "Morning, Alex. You want coffee before you go?" "Just a quick cup. Thanks, Maria." She poured from the expensive machine that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, then leaned against the counter with the familiarity of someone who'd earned her place in this house through decades of loyal service. "Your father's been up since 5, she said quietly, pacing in his study, making phone calls. "I think last night shook him up pretty good." "Did he say anything?" "You know your father, he doesn't talk feelings with help." She studied my face with the sharp eyes of someone who'd raised children of her own. "But I've been watching this family for 20 years, Mijo. He's proud of you." "Scared, maybe, but proud." "Scared of what?" "Of how much he doesn't know about his own son." The observation hit harder than I expected. I finished my coffee in silence, kissed Maria's cheek, something I'd done since childhood, and headed for the garage, where my motorcycle waited between my father's Mercedes and Marcus's BMW like a mechanical middle finger to family tradition. The ride to Putnam Avenue took 15 minutes through Greenwich's tree-lined streets, past mansions that housed hedge fund managers and pharmaceutical executives, past manicured lawns that never showed a brown patch or wayward weed. It was a world built on the illusion of perfect control, which made it the perfect place to hide in plain sight. The coffee shop was one of those deliberately rustic places that charged $8 for drinks with names like, quote, Autumn Harvest Spice Fusion. I spotted Catherine immediately. Auburn hair in a messy bun, oversized glasses, paint-stained cardigan that made her look like a struggling graduate student. In reality, she held 3 advanced degrees and could kill a man with a coffee stirrer. She didn't look up as I approached her corner table, but she'd positioned herself with clear sightlines to all entrances and exits. Professional paranoia disguised as artsy coffee shop ambiance. "You're 10 minutes late," she said, still focused on her laptop screen. "Traffic." "Bullshit. You took the scenic route to check for surveillance." Now she looked up, green eyes sharp behind the designer glasses that probably contained more technology than most people's phones. "Sit down, Alex. We have a problem." I slid into the chair across from her, noting the way she'd chosen a table with solid backing and multiple escape routes. Even in civilian mode, Catherine thought like an operator. How bad? Colonel Morrison's little social call last night lit up every intelligence network from here to Langley. Your cover identity just became the worst-kept secret in the federal government. She turned her laptop screen toward me. It showed a surveillance photo of Morrison's sedan leaving the Blackwood estate, timestamp 2,147 hours. Below it, a partial transcript of radio chatter from an unknown source. "Someone was watching the house?" I asked. "Multiple people." The Morrison Family Trust isn't just any client, Alex. The Colonel's father made his fortune in defense contracting during the Cold War. There are 3 different federal agencies that monitor anyone who gets within 50 feet of that family's money. And now they all know I'm connected to the Blackwoods. They know a decorated Army general is hiding out in Connecticut, playing house with an investment banker's family. The question is why? Catherine closed the laptop and leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "There's chatter, Alex. Someone's been asking questions about your service record, your current status, your psychological evaluations from last year." My blood chilled. The psychological evaluations were classified at the highest levels. The kind of classification that made congressional oversight committees pretend they didn't exist. What kind of questions? The kind that suggests someone wants to know if you're fit for duty or if you've had some kind of breakdown. The kind that make people wonder whether America's youngest major general went off the grid because he's damaged goods. Who's asking? That's what we need to figure out. But Alex, whoever it is, has access to information they shouldn't have. Your real service record, your citations, even details about Kabul that weren't in any official report. The mention of Kabul sent familiar shadows crawling up my spine. 6 months ago, I'd been preparing for my next assignment when the nightmares started coming every night instead of just occasionally. When I'd started seeing insurgent fighters in every crowd, hearing incoming mortars in every loud noise, feeling the phantom weight of bodies I'd carried to safety through 14 hours of urban combat. The Army psychiatrists called it operational stress, a normal response to extreme circumstances that would fade with time and distance. They'd recommended extended leave, a return to civilian life until my psychological baseline stabilized. What they didn't know was that the stress wasn't from what I'd done in Kabul, it was from what I'd learned there. Catherine, there's something you need to know about my leave status. I know you're on medical leave for stress-related issues. That's not exactly classified information among people with our clearance levels. It's not medical leave, it's protective custody disguised as medical leave. The words stopped her mid-sip of her artisanal latte. She set the cup down with deliberate care. Come again? In Kabul, during the evacuation, I stumbled across something. Documents, communications, evidence of arms sales to groups that officially don't exist. American weapons ending up in the hands of people who were shooting at American soldiers. Jesus, Alex. The investigation was buried before it started. National security concerns, diplomatic complications, the usual bureaucratic bullshit. But someone leaked those documents to a journalist before they could be permanently sealed. Someone like you? Someone exactly like me, and now that journalist is dead, the documents are missing, and I'm the only witness to what was in them. Catherine's face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. You're telling me you're not on medical leave, you're in hiding. I'm telling you that 6 months ago, I stopped being Major General Alexander Richardson and became Alex Blackwood, an unemployed security guard with family issues. It was supposed to be temporary, until the heat died down and they could figure out what to do with me. And now your cover's blown because some random colonel recognized you at a family dinner. Not random. Morrison's father built half the military-industrial complex. If there's a conspiracy involving defense contractors and arms trafficking, the Morrison family would be right in the middle of it. Catherine stared at me for a long moment, then pulled out her phone and started typing rapidly. What are you doing? Calling in favors. If you're right about this, then last night wasn't a coincidence. Someone sent Morrison to that house knowing exactly what would happen. You think it was a setup? I think Colonel Morrison showing up at your father's dinner party the same day someone starts asking questions about your psychological fitness is about as coincidental as finding a unicorn in Times Square. She finished typing and put the phone away. I've got analysts running background checks on Morrison and cross-referencing his family's defense contracts with your service history. If there's a connection, we'll find it. And if there isn't? Then we figure out who else knew you were hiding in Connecticut and why they wanted to flush you out. The coffee shop door chimed, and both of us automatically checked the new arrival. A businessman in his 50s, expensive suit, the kind of soft hands that had never held anything more dangerous than a golf club. He ordered something complicated and pretentious, paid with a black credit card, and found a table near the window. Perfectly normal. Completely innocent. And yet Catherine's hand had moved subtly closer to her purse, where I knew she kept a compact pistol that wasn't on any federal registry. Alex, I need you to think carefully about last night. Every detail, every word, every person who knew you'd be at that dinner. Just family. And I didn't tell anyone. I was going. Vivian called yesterday afternoon and insisted I come. Said it was important for family unity. Who else knew about the dinner? Marcus probably told people at work. Vivian might have mentioned it to her social circle. My father. I paused, remembering something. My father was on the phone when I arrived. Business call, but he seemed agitated about something. What kind of business call? I don't know, but he mentioned something about reviewing client files, making sure everything was in order for some kind of audit. Catherine's expression darkened. An audit of what? Investment portfolios, I assume that's what the firm does. Alex, what if the audit wasn't about investments? What if someone's been using Blackwood and Associates to launder money from defense contracts? What if your father's firm is how arms dealers have been moving money around without federal oversight? The possibility hit me like a punch to the gut. My father, with his careful respectability and old money connections, would be the perfect front for financial operations that needed to look legitimate. and I'd been hiding right under his roof, the one person with enough military intelligence background to recognize the patterns if I'd been looking for them. "We need to get back to the house," I said, standing abruptly. "Why?" "Because if you're right, then my family isn't just harboring a fugitive general. They're potential targets themselves." Catherine was already packing her laptop. "Or potential accomplices. My father isn't involved in arms trafficking." "Your father manages investments for defense contractors, Alex. If money's been moving through his firm without his knowledge, then he's a liability. And if he does know—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. In the intelligence world, there were only two kinds of liabilities: the ones you protected and the ones you eliminated. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. The display showed my father's number. "Alex, thank God, where are you?" His voice carried an edge of panic I'd never heard before. "In town." "What's wrong?" "There are men here, federal agents," they said. "They have a warrant to search the house, and they're asking questions about you. About your military service, your current status, your relationship with our clients." I met Catherine's eyes across the table. She was already standing, her hand inside her purse. "Dad, listen to me carefully. Don't answer any questions until you have a lawyer present. Don't sign anything, don't consent to anything, don't try to be helpful." "Alex, what's going on? What have you done?" The questions stung, but I pushed the emotion aside. I haven't done anything wrong, but someone wants it to look like I have. "Get everyone out of the house. Vivian, Marcus, even Maria. Send them somewhere public, somewhere safe." "I can't just leave. This is my home, my business." "Dad, please, trust me on this. If these men are who I think they are, your home and business are the least of your concerns right now." The line went quiet for a moment. Then, "Son, are you in danger?" The word son nearly broke my composure. He hadn't called me that in years. "We all are. I'll explain everything later, but right now I need you to do exactly what I said. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Alex, whatever's happening, whatever you're involved in, we'll figure it out. Family sticks together." He hung up before I could respond. I stared at the phone, feeling the weight of 15 years of distance collapsing into a single moment of connection. "Family sticks together," Catherine repeated. "Nice sentiment. Let's hope it's true." She was already walking toward the exit, moving with the casual urgency of someone who'd spent years practicing emergency departures. "Come on, General. Time to find out who's been playing games with your life." As we left the coffee shop, I caught a glimpse of the businessman in the expensive suit. He was no longer looking at his phone or his complicated coffee. He was watching us leave, and his soft hands were speaking rapidly into a device that definitely wasn't a cell phone. Catherine had been right about one thing. There were no coincidences in this business. The question was whether we were still ahead of whoever was hunting us, or if we'd already walked into a trap that had been years in the making. The storage unit sat in an industrial park 20 miles outside Greenwich, surrounded by chain-link fence and security cameras that had been strategically disabled 6 months ago. Catherine had acquired the space under a shell identity, one of dozens she maintained for situations exactly like this. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed over bankers' boxes, encrypted hard drives, and enough classified documents to start a small war or end several political careers. "Welcome to my insurance policy," Catherine said, punching in the access code. "Everything the government would prefer stayed buried. I keep copies here." I followed her inside, noting the sophisticated alarm system and the subtle modifications that turned a standard storage unit into a miniature command center. A folding table held laptops and communication equipment. Cork boards lined the walls, covered with photographs, documents, and red string connecting various players in what looked like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. "How long have you been building this?" 3 years, ever since the Meridian incident." The name hit me like ice water. Meridian was classified beyond top secret, a failed operation in Syria that had cost 8 American lives and resulted in weapons caches falling into enemy hands. Officially, it had been a tactical miscalculation. Unofficially, someone had sold the mission details to the highest bidder. "You think Meridian and Kabul are connected?" Catherine pulled a thick file from one of the boxes. "I think they're part of a pattern that goes back 7 years and involves some of the most respected names in American defense." She opened the file, revealing satellite photos, financial records, and communication intercepts. Look at this. Meridian, the Kabul evacuation, the Coast ambush, the Fallujah supply line attacks. Every major intelligence failure in the last 7 years has one thing in common. Which is private defense contractors with ties to the Morrison Family Trust, managed by Blackwood and Associates. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My father's firm wasn't just connected to the conspiracy, it was the financial backbone that made it possible. That's impossible. My father's the most ethical man I know. He wouldn't. Your father might not know. But someone in his firm has been moving money in patterns that correspond exactly with arms sales and intelligence leaks. She spread out financial documents across the table. Look at these transfer patterns. 2 weeks before Meridian, $3 million moved through shell companies linked to Morrison Defense Systems. 1 week before Kabul, another $2 million. Every time, the money flows through accounts managed by Blackwood and Associates. I studied the documents, my intelligence training automatically analyzing the patterns. The timing was too precise to be coincidental, but the amounts seemed small for major arms deals. These aren't payments for weapons, I said slowly. They're too small, too frequent. Exactly, they're payments for information. Someone's been selling American military intelligence to the highest bidder, and your father's firm has been their payment processor. But who? Who in my father's firm would have access to military intelligence? Catherine pointed to a photograph pinned to the corkboard. It showed a man in his 40s, well-dressed, standing next to my father at some kind of corporate event. Meet Thomas Brennan, senior partner at Blackwood and Associates. Harvard MBA, 10 years with the firm, impeccable reputation. She paused. Also a former CIA analyst with top-secret clearance, who was quietly asked to resign 5 years ago for undisclosed ethical violations. The photograph showed Brennan shaking hands with my father, both men smiling for the camera. In the background, I could see other familiar faces. Clients, colleagues, people I'd met at family gatherings over the years. My father mentioned him, said he was brilliant with risk assessment. He's brilliant, all right. Brilliant enough to identify which operations were most vulnerable to intelligence leaks. Brilliant enough to know exactly what information would be worth buying. Catherine pulled out another file, this one marked with my name. But here's what really concerns me. 3 days before the Kabul evacuation, someone accessed your personnel file. Someone with Brennan's clearance level. He knew I'd be there. He knew you'd be there. He knew what you'd find, and he knew you'd be the kind of officer who wouldn't let it go. She met my eyes. Alex, I think you were set up from the beginning. The documents you found, the evidence of arms sales, I think you were meant to find them. Why? Because you're incorruptible. Everyone in the intelligence community knows that about you. If Major General Alexander Richardson found evidence of arms trafficking and reported it, everyone would believe him. You'd be the perfect scapegoat. The implications were staggering. Everything that had happened in Kabul, my discovery of the documents, my decision to leak them to the journalist, all of it had been orchestrated by someone who knew exactly how I'd react. The journalist who died, I said. What was his name? David Park, freelance investigative reporter, specialized in defense contractor corruption. Catherine pulled up a file on her laptop. Found dead in his hotel room in Bangkok 6 weeks after you gave him the documents. Local police called it a heart attack, but Park was 32 years old and in perfect health. Someone killed him. Someone killed him, took the documents and made sure the story would never see daylight, which left you as the only person who could testify about what was in those files. So they discredited me, made it look like I was having a psychological breakdown. Exactly, a decorated general suffering from PTSD isn't credible testimony in a congressional hearing, but a dead general can't testify at all. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Catherine was right. If they couldn't discredit me permanently, the next logical step was to eliminate me entirely. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Your family is safe for now. Meet me at the Riverside Cemetery, Section 7, at 1400 hours. Come alone, TB. Catherine read the message over my shoulder. Thomas Brennan. He wants to meet. It's a trap. Probably, but it might also be our only chance to find out who's really behind this. She was already packing equipment into a tactical bag. We'll need surveillance equipment, backup communication, and an exit strategy. Catherine, if Brennan's been selling intelligence that got American soldiers killed, I'm not walking into a cemetery to have a polite conversation with him. No, but you're going to get answers. We need to know who he's working for, how deep this goes, and what they're planning next. She handed me a small earpiece and a device that looked like a cell phone. Emergency beacon. If things go sideways, press the red button and I'll have backup at your location in under 10 minutes. What kind of backup? The kind that doesn't officially exist but takes betraying American soldiers very seriously. I pocketed the devices and checked my watch. 2 hours until the meeting. What about my family? Already handled. I've got friends watching the hotel where they're staying. Brennan was telling the truth about them being safe, for now. And after the meeting? Catherine's expression darkened. That depends on what we find out. If Brennan's just a middleman, we might be able to cut a deal. If he's running the whole operation. She didn't finish the sentence. In the intelligence world, there were worse fates than death, and betraying your own country was one of the few crimes that guaranteed you'd experience them all. There's something else, Catherine said, pulling out a sealed envelope. This arrived at my apartment this morning, no postmark, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Me in full dress uniform, receiving the Distinguished Service Cross from the Secretary of Defense. But someone had drawn a red X across my face in what looked suspiciously like blood. Charming, I said. Any idea who sent it? Working on it. But Alex, whoever's behind this has resources, connections, and a very personal interest in making sure you disappear permanently. Because I know too much. Because you represent everything they hate about the military. Honor, integrity, loyalty to something bigger than personal profit. She took the photograph back. You're not just a witness to their crimes. You're living proof that their worldview is bullshit. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting strange shadows across the cork boards and documents. Looking around the storage unit, I realized this was what my life had become. Hiding in the shadows, surrounded by evidence of crimes I couldn't prosecute, and betrayals I couldn't prevent. Catherine, what if we're wrong? What if my father really is involved in this? Then you'll have to decide what matters more, your family or your country. That's not a choice I should have to make. No, it's not, but it's the choice that separates real soldiers from the ones who just wear the uniform. She was right, and I hated her for it. In Afghanistan and Iraq, the moral choices had been clear. Protect your team, complete the mission, serve your country. But here, in a storage unit in Connecticut, the lines were blurred beyond recognition. One more thing, Catherine said, pulling out a manila folder. Your psychological evaluation from 6 months ago. The one that recommended extended leave. I'd never seen the full report, only the summary that had been used to justify my absence from duty. Major General Richardson exhibits classic symptoms of operational stress, I read aloud. Hypervigilance, difficulty trusting authority figures, paranoid ideation regarding mission security. Keep reading. However, the subject's concerns about intelligence breaches and arms trafficking show clear logical consistency and detailed knowledge that suggests a possible factual basis. I looked up at Catherine. The psychiatrist believed me. Dr. Sarah Chen believed you. She also believed that someone had deliberately traumatized you to discredit your testimony. Her report recommended a full investigation into your claims before any fitness for duty determination. What happened to her recommendation? Buried by the same people who buried your evidence. Dr. Chen was transferred to a research position in Alaska 3 weeks after filing her report. Jesus. There's more. Dr. Chen managed to send a copy of her full evaluation to a colleague before she was transferred. Someone she trusted to keep it safe until the right time came to use it. Who? Catherine smiled grimly. Me. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. The conspiracy wasn't just about arms dealing or defense contractor corruption. It was about discrediting and eliminating anyone who threatened to expose the truth, using the very system that was supposed to protect national security. How many people are involved in this? We're about to find out, but Alex, I need you to understand something before you meet with Brennan. If this goes as deep as I think it does, there might not be anyone left to trust. Not in the Pentagon, not in Congress, not even in your own family. Then what's the point of fighting it? Because that's what soldiers do. We fight the wars nobody else wants to fight, against enemies nobody else wants to face, for people who might never know our names. She handed me a tactical vest, disguised as a casual jacket. Besides, you're not fighting alone anymore. Looking around the storage unit one last time, I realized Catherine was right about more than just the conspiracy. For the first time in 6 months, I wasn't hiding from my responsibilities. I was preparing to face them head-on, regardless of the personal cost. The clock on the wall showed 1,130 hours. In 2.5 hours, I'd either have answers or I'd be dead. Given what I'd learned about the scope of the conspiracy, I wasn't sure which outcome would be preferable. Riverside Cemetery stretched across 40 acres of rolling hills, dotted with marble monuments and ancient oak trees that had witnessed a century of Greenwich's secrets. Section 7 sat at the cemetery's highest point, offering clear sightlines in all directions, a tactician's dream for either surveillance or an ambush. Thomas Brennan stood beside a weathered headstone, his expensive suit incongruous among the granite memorials. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his posture, the way his eyes constantly scanned the tree line. He was afraid, which made him either desperate or extremely dangerous. "He's alone," Catherine's voice crackled through my earpiece. "But I've got thermal signatures in the woods to your east. At least 3 men, military spacing, professional positioning." "Copy that. How long until backup arrives?" 12 minutes. Try to keep him talking." I approached Brennan with my hands visible, moving with the deliberate calm of someone who'd walked into hostile territory more times than he could count. He watched me come, his face a mask of professional composure that didn't quite hide the desperation underneath. "General Richardson," he said as I stopped 10 feet away, "thank you for coming. Skip the pleasantries, Brennan. You've been selling American soldiers' lives for profit. The only question is whether you're going to try to justify it or just tell me who you're working for." His laugh was bitter, hollow. "You think this is about money? You think I've been doing this for personal gain? Then enlighten me." Brennan pulled out a tablet, swiped to a video file, and held it out toward me. 3 years ago, my daughter was kidnapped while studying abroad in Morocco. The local authorities found her body 2 weeks later. The video showed a young woman, maybe 22, with Brennan's eyes and a bright smile. The timestamp indicated it was taken just days before her death. "I'm sorry for your loss, but that doesn't justify. The men who killed her were carrying American weapons, General. Weapons that had been sold to, quote, moderate rebels through programs I'd helped design when I was still CIA. My own work had armed my daughter's murderers." The revelation hit harder than I'd expected. Whatever I'd been prepared for, it wasn't this, a father's grief twisted into systematic betrayal. "So you decided to burn down the entire system?" "I decided to expose it. Every arms deal, every covert operation, every time we put weapons in the hands of people who would use them against innocents." He gestured toward the tablet. "Everything I've done, every intelligence operation I've compromised, has been to document the corruption that turns American foreign policy into a profit machine. By getting American soldiers killed, by proving that American soldiers are already being killed by weapons we sold to their enemies." His composure cracked, revealing raw fury beneath. "You found those documents in Kabul, Richardson. You saw the evidence. We're not fighting terrorism. We're arming it, then sending our own people to die fighting the monsters we created." The truth in his words was undeniable, but so was the cost. How many operations have you compromised? How many soldiers died because of your information leaks? 47 confirmed deaths over 3 years. I have their names, their service records, their families' addresses. He pulled out a leather journal, pages filled with handwritten entries. I memorized every one of them. They're the price of exposing a system that would have killed thousands more. Jesus Christ, Brennan. But here's what you don't understand, General. I'm not the architect of this conspiracy. I'm its unwilling tool. The people really running this operation have been using me just like they used you. What do you mean? You think it was coincidence that you found those documents in Kabul? You think it was luck that led you to exactly the right building, the right room, the right filing cabinet? Brennan's smile was grim. You were directed there, Richardson. Someone wanted you to find that evidence. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Someone who knew I'd report it through proper channels. Someone who knew you'd be ignored, discredited, and eventually eliminated. You were supposed to be the fall guy, the traumatized general who cracked under pressure and started making wild accusations about arms trafficking. But I didn't crack. I leaked the documents, which forced them to accelerate their timeline. The journalist's death, your forced leave, the psychological evaluation, all improvised damage control because you didn't follow their script. Who are they, Brennan? Who's really running this? Before he could answer, my earpiece crackled with Catherine's voice. Alex, get down! Sniper in the oak tree, 2 o'clock! I dove behind the nearest headstone as the first shot shattered the granite where my head had been. Brennan wasn't as fast. The second shot took him center mass, spinning him around before he collapsed beside a child's grave marker. Catherine, I need that backup now! 6 minutes out! 3 shooters moving on your position from the east! I low-crawled to Brennan, who was clutching his chest, blood seeping between his fingers. His breathing was labored but steady. The shot had missed his heart and lungs. The journal, he gasped, pressing the leather book into my hands. Everything's in there. Names, dates, financial records. Who's in charge, Brennan? Who's running the operation? Not who you think. His eyes were losing focus. Your father, he's not involved. But someone close to him. Someone with access. Another shot ricocheted off the headstone above us. I could hear movement in the woods, tactical footsteps closing the distance. Brennan, stay with me. Who has access to your father's files? Family members. Someone who could move money without questions. His voice was fading. Check the Morrison account. Check who really controls. His eyes closed, but his chest still rose and fell, alive but unconscious. The sound of helicopters filled the air. Catherine's backup arriving ahead of schedule. I heard shouting from the woods, then the distinctive crack of sniper rifles engaging multiple targets. General Richardson, this is Colonel Hayes, Army Criminal Investigation Command. Are you secure? Secure. 1 wounded civilian needs immediate medical attention. As the tactical team swept the cemetery, I opened Brennan's journal. Page after page of meticulous records, but one entry stopped me cold. Payment authorization for Meridian Intelligence, V. Blackwood, power of attorney for Morrison Family Trust. Vivian, my stepmother had been signing off on payments for intelligence that got American soldiers killed. The secure conference room at Fort Hamilton felt like a war council from a different era. Maps covered the walls, classified documents spread across a mahogany table that had probably witnessed planning sessions for operations stretching back to World War II. Catherine sat across from me, flanked by 2 analysts whose security clearances were so high they didn't officially exist. Colonel Hayes paced behind a presentation screen, his weathered face grim with the weight of what we'd uncovered. Gentlemen, lady, what we're dealing with isn't just arms trafficking or intelligence leaks. It's systematic corruption that reaches into the highest levels of defense contracting and family wealth management. He clicked to the first slide, showing financial flowcharts that looked like a spiderweb of shell companies and offshore accounts. The Morrison Family Trust isn't just a client of Blackwood and Associates. It's the financial hub for a network of defense contractors who've been selling weapons to both sides of every major conflict for the past decade. Catherine leaned forward. And Vivian Blackwood has had power of attorney over the trust's operational accounts for 6 years, ever since she married into the family. But she's not the mastermind, I said, studying the documents Brennan had died protecting. Look at the signature patterns, the authorization timestamps. Someone else has been using her access, probably without her knowledge. One of the analysts, a young woman with the sharp eyes of someone who saw patterns others missed, pulled up a series of bank records on her laptop. The authorization signatures don't match Mrs. Blackwood's handwriting from other documents. Someone's been forging her signature on the payment authorizations. Who has access to her signature, her personal information, her power of attorney documents? Hayes asked. I already knew the answer, had known it since reading Brennan's journal in the cemetery. Marcus, my half-brother has access to all the family's legal documents through his position at the firm. He's been using Vivian's power of attorney to move money while she remained completely oblivious. Your own brother, Catherine said quietly. Half-brother, and apparently someone who decided family loyalty was less important than defense contractor profits. Hayes clicked to the next slide, showing surveillance photos of Marcus meeting with men I didn't recognize. We've been tracking him for the past 8 hours. 3 meetings with known arms dealers, 2 phone calls to offshore accounts, and 1 very interesting conversation with a man we believe arranged the attack at the cemetery. He ordered the hit on Brennan and on you. According to intercepted communications, the plan was to eliminate both of you and make it look like a falling out between conspirators. Marcus would inherit your father's firm, your family would mourn 2 tragic losses, and the arms trafficking would continue under new management. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Marcus had spent years mocking my choices, my career, my apparent lack of success. Now I understood why. He'd seen me as a threat to an operation that had made him wealthy beyond anything our father's legitimate business could provide. What about my father? How much does he know? Catherine consulted her tablet. Based on digital forensics of his personal devices and office computers, William Blackwood appears to be completely in the dark. The Morrison account was managed exclusively by Marcus, who told his father the complexity required specialized handling. And Vivian? Innocent but naive. She signed power of attorney documents without reading them carefully, trusted her stepson to handle family finances properly. Hayes's expression softened slightly. She's been a victim in this, just like the soldiers who died because of leaked intelligence. What's our next move? We need Marcus to confess on record, with enough detail to expose the entire network. The Morrison Family Trust is just one node. There are at least 12 other families and firms involved in this conspiracy. How do we get him to talk? Catherine smiled, the predatory expression of someone who'd spent years making dangerous people make very bad decisions. We're gonna offer him something he wants more than money. We're gonna offer him you. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus believed I was dead, killed in the cemetery attack along with Brennan. We would let him continue believing that, while setting up a meeting where he'd expect to collect payment for eliminating the last witness to his crimes. He'll be confident, arrogant, ready to celebrate his victory, Catherine explained. That's when people make mistakes, when they reveal information they meant to keep hidden. And if he doesn't take the bait, then we'll have to consider more direct methods of persuasion. Hayes pulled up building schematics on the main screen. The meet is set for tonight, 2,100 hours, at the Blackwood & Associates offices. Marcus thinks he's meeting with his handlers to receive final payment and discuss expanding operations. Instead, he's walking into a room full of federal recording equipment and his supposedly dead half-brother. Exactly. We'll have the building surrounded, every entrance covered, every conversation recorded. By tomorrow morning, we'll have enough evidence to roll up the entire network. One of the analysts looked up from her computer. General Richardson, there's something else you should know. We found references to other operations in Brennan's files. Arms deals in Syria, intelligence leaks in Afghanistan, weapons shipments to Mexican cartels. This network has been operating for over a decade. How many people have died because of their operations? Conservative estimate? Several thousand, including approximately 200 American military personnel. The number hit me like a physical blow. 200 American soldiers, dead, because my half-brother and his associates had prioritized profit over patriotism. Catherine, I want him to know exactly what he's done. I want him to hear every name, every unit, every family that paid the price for his greed. That might not be legally advisable. I don't care about legal advisability. I care about those soldiers getting justice. Hayes nodded grimly. Generally, I understand the sentiment. But we need Marcus alive and talking if we're going to expose everyone involved in this conspiracy. Personal vengeance won't bring back the dead, but a full confession might prevent future deaths. He was right, and I hated him for it. But I'd spent 15 years in the army learning to subordinate personal feelings to mission objectives. Tonight would be no different. What about my father? Does he know what's happening? He's been briefed on the basic situation that his son is under investigation for financial crimes related to defense contracting. We thought it best to keep the details classified until after tonight's operation. And Vivian? Same briefing. They're both in protective custody, officially for their own safety but actually to prevent them from inadvertently warning Marcus. Catherine checked her watch. 6 hours until the meeting. We should start final preparations. As the team dispersed to their various tasks, I remained in the conference room, staring at the wall maps and thinking about the soldiers whose names filled Brennan's journal. They'd died believing they were serving their country, never knowing they'd been betrayed by people who saw their sacrifice as nothing more than collateral damage in a profitable business venture. Tonight, that betrayal would finally have consequences. The Blackwood and Associates offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower overlooking Greenwich Harbor, its modern architecture, a stark contrast to the old money traditions the firm represented. At 9 p.m., the building was officially empty, except for security guards who'd been quietly replaced by federal agents hours earlier. I sat in my father's corner office, surrounded by awards and photographs that chronicled 40 years of respectable success. On the desk, family pictures showed happier times. My mother's wedding day, Marcus as a child, even a few shots of me in an army dress uniform from before everything went wrong. Catherine's voice came through my earpiece. Target approaching the main entrance. He's alone, appears confident. Remember, we need him to incriminate himself voluntarily. Copy that. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the lights of boats moving across the harbor, peaceful and normal in a way that felt alien after everything we'd discovered. In 30 minutes, my half-brother would either be in federal custody or dead, depending on how cooperative he chose to be. The elevator chimed softly. Footsteps in the hallway, moving with the casual confidence of someone who belonged here. Marcus appeared in the doorway, dressed in an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase that probably contained payment records for services that had cost American lives. Jesus Christ, he breathed, stopping dead when he saw me sitting behind our father's desk. You're supposed to be dead. Disappointing, I know. But I've always been hard to kill. Marcus's hand moved toward his jacket, then stopped when he realized he was surrounded by federal agents who'd already drawn their weapons. Smart choice, I said. Have a seat, we need to talk. He sat down slowly, his businessman's composure cracking as he processed the implications of my survival. How much do you know? Everything. Brennan's journal, the Morrison Trust, the arms deals, the intelligence leaks. The only question is whether you're going to confess voluntarily or make this difficult for everyone. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Alex. This operation goes higher than you can imagine. Defense contractors, government officials, people who could destroy your career with a phone call. My career's already been destroyed. The question is whether yours will end with a prison sentence or a coffin. Marcus laughed, but it sounded forced. You always were self-righteous. Even as kids, you had to be the perfect son, the hero, the one who did everything right. I wasn't perfect. I was just trying to serve something bigger than myself. Serve what? A system that sends soldiers to die for corporate profits? A government that arms terrorists, then acts surprised when they use those weapons against us? His voice rose with genuine passion. At least I was honest about my motivations. You were honest about greed, not about patriotism. Patriotism is a luxury for people who don't understand how the world really works, Alex. Every weapon we sold, every intelligence report we leaked, it was all going to happen anyway. The only difference was whether we profited from it or some other network did. And the soldiers who died because of your leaked intelligence? What about them? Marcus's face hardened. Acceptable losses in a larger game. Everyone should understand that concept. The cold calculation in his voice was more chilling than any threat. This wasn't a man who'd been corrupted by greed. This was someone who'd rationalized mass murder as a business decision. How long have you been planning to kill me? Since the moment you came back from Afghanistan with those documents, I knew you'd never let it go, never accept that some truths are too dangerous to reveal. He leaned forward. But I gave you chances, Alex. I could have had you eliminated years ago, but I hoped you'd take the hint and disappear permanently. By discrediting me, making it look like I'd had a psychological breakdown. By offering you a graceful exit from a game you were never equipped to play. But you couldn't let it go, could you? You had to keep digging, keep asking questions, keep believing that honor and integrity mattered more than survival. Catherine's voice crackled in my earpiece. Alex, we've got enough for conspiracy and treason charges, wrap this up. But I wasn't finished. The Morrison Family Trust, Marcus? Tell me how it works. Simple. Defense contractors need to move money without government oversight. Wealthy families need investment returns that beat traditional markets. We facilitated mutually beneficial arrangements by laundering payment for arms sales to terrorist organizations, by connecting buyers and sellers in a market that existed long before we got involved. His arrogance was breathtaking. Do you know how much money flows through the international arms trade every year, Alex? Hundreds of billions. We were taking a tiny percentage while providing valuable services to all parties involved, including the parties who killed American soldiers with the weapons you helped them buy, including the parties who were going to acquire those weapons regardless of our involvement. At least this way, we could monitor the transactions, track the weapons, sometimes even influence how they were used. You're saying you were running a patriotic arms dealing operation? I'm saying we were making the best of an impossible situation while ensuring our family's financial security for generations to come. The rationalization was so complete, so thoroughly constructed, that I almost admired its psychological architecture. Marcus had convinced himself that betraying his country was actually a form of public service. What about Vivian? How did you get her to sign the authorization documents? Vivian signs whatever I put in front of her. She's been doing it for years, trusting me to handle the complicated financial arrangements she doesn't understand. His smile was cold. Plausible deniability for the whole family. Even Dad could honestly say he knew nothing about the Morrison account's real purpose. Because you kept them in the dark while using their names and reputations to legitimize your operation. I protected them. If this operation had been exposed, they would have been insulated from any legal consequences. But I wouldn't have been. No, Alex, you were always going to be the fall guy. The traumatized general who cracked under pressure and started making wild accusations about defense contractor corruption. By the time anyone took your claims seriously, you'd be dead and the evidence would point to you as the mastermind. Except I didn't crack. I stayed sane long enough to expose you. Marcus's expression darkened. You stayed sane long enough to destroy everything I built. Do you have any idea how much money you've cost me? How many carefully constructed relationships have you ruined? Do you have any idea how many families you've destroyed? How many soldiers died because of the intelligence you sold to their enemies? Soldiers die, Alex. That's what they're for. At least their deaths served a higher purpose. What higher purpose? Proving that American military dominance is an illusion, demonstrating that our supposed technological superiority means nothing when the enemy knows our plans in advance. His voice carried the fervor of a true believer. Every failed operation, every successful ambush, every American casualty was evidence that this country's military supremacy is built on propaganda and wishful thinking. The confession was more than Catherine had hoped for, more than we'd needed to destroy the entire network. But it was also more than I could bear to hear without reacting. You betrayed your own country to prove a political point? I opened people's eyes to reality. American exceptionalism is a myth, Alex. We're not the good guys in a global struggle between freedom and tyranny. We're just another imperial power using military force to protect economic interests. And you decided to prove that by helping our enemies kill American soldiers. I decided to accelerate an inevitable process. This empire was always going to fall, Alex. I just wanted to profit from its collapse. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Whatever I'd expected from my half-brother, it wasn't this, not ideological fanaticism wrapped in financial greed, not patriotism inverted into systematic betrayal. Catherine, I said quietly, I think we're done here. Copy that. Tactical teams moving in now. The office doors burst open as federal agents swarmed the room. Marcus didn't resist as they cuffed him, didn't protest as they read him his rights. He just smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd finally revealed his true beliefs. "You think you've won something here, Alex," he said as they led him away. "But this network has been operating for over a decade. We have assets in every major defense contractor, contacts in every relevant government agency. Arresting me won't stop anything." "Maybe not, but it'll stop you. There are dozens of people just like me, Alex. People who understand that patriotism is for suckers, and profit is the only reliable loyalty." His voice echoed down the hallway as the agents escorted him to the elevator. "You can't arrest an idea whose time has come." The office fell silent except for the distant sound of harbor traffic and the gentle hum of air conditioning. I sat alone in my father's chair, surrounded by the evidence of a lifetime spent building something honorable, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. Catherine appeared in the doorway, holstering her sidearm. "You okay?" "No, but I'll survive." "Alex, what Marcus said about other assets in the network, we're gonna need your help identifying them." "I'll help however I can. But first, I need to see my father. I need to tell him what his son really was." "That's not going to be an easy conversation." "None of this has been easy. But he deserves to know the truth." 6 months later, I stood at the podium in the Pentagon's largest briefing room, facing an audience of generals, congressmen, and journalists who'd spent weeks digesting the implications of what we'd uncovered. The Marcus Blackwood investigation had exposed corruption that reached into a dozen defense contractors, 3 congressional offices, and 2 federal agencies. "The final count," I said, reading from my prepared statement, "is 47 confirmed intelligence leaks, resulting in the deaths of 312 American military personnel and approximately 1,800 civilian casualties across 7 countries and 4 combat theaters." The numbers felt abstract until you read the names, saw the faces, met the families. I'd spent the last 6 months doing exactly that, traveling across the country to personally brief the families of soldiers who died because my half-brother had sold their lives for profit. The financial scope of the conspiracy involved approximately $400 million in illegal arms sales and $80 million in payments for classified intelligence over a 10-year period. Assets have been frozen, accounts seized, and restitution will be paid to the families of confirmed casualties. In the audience, I spotted my father sitting beside Vivian in the front row, reserved for family members. He'd aged a decade in 6 months, the weight of his son's betrayal etching new lines around his eyes. But he'd been there for every briefing, every court hearing, every painful revelation about the son he'd raised. Marcus Blackwood has been sentenced to life in federal prison without possibility of parole for treason, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. 17 other members of the network have received sentences ranging from 25 years to life. Financial assets totaling $120 million have been forfeited and will be used to establish the Fallen Heroes Memorial Fund. The sentence had been delivered 3 weeks ago in a courthouse packed with military families and media representatives. Marcus had shown no remorse, even using his final statement to defend his actions as necessary corrections to American foreign policy overreach. The judge had been unmoved. The investigation has resulted in new oversight protocols for defense contractor relationships, enhanced security measures for classified intelligence, and mandatory financial auditing for firms managing government-related trust funds. Catherine, now promoted to Deputy Director of Military Intelligence, had spearheaded the reforms. She sat 2 rows back, wearing dress blues and the kind of satisfied expression that came from seeing justice actually served. However, the most important outcome of this investigation is not the convictions or the policy changes. It's the reminder that patriotism and profit are not synonymous, that serving your country means accepting personal sacrifice, and that the price of freedom includes eternal vigilance against those who would sell it for personal gain. I paused, looking out at faces that represented the best of what America could be when its institutions worked as intended. I've been asked repeatedly why I chose to expose my own family's involvement in this conspiracy. The answer is simple: because the soldiers who died deserved better than silence, because the families who lost them deserved truth, and because the oath I swore to defend this country didn't include exceptions for blood relatives. The applause was subdued, respectful. This wasn't a celebration, it was a funeral for innocence, a wake for the illusion that honor was universal among those entrusted with national security. After the briefing, I found my father and Vivian in the Pentagon's Memorial Corridor, studying the walls covered with names of fallen service members. Vivian's eyes were red from crying, but her composure was intact. My father looked older, frailer, but somehow more solid than I'd seen him in years. "Son," he said as I approached. The word carried weight it hadn't held since my mother died. "Dad, I want you to know that what Marcus did, the choices he made, they don't reflect the values your mother and I tried to instill. I know that. Do you? Because I've been thinking about this for months, wondering if I failed him somehow, if there were signs I should have seen." I'd wrestled with the same questions. Marcus made his own choices. He had the same upbringing, the same opportunities, the same examples of right and wrong. He chose differently. Vivian spoke for the first time since I'd joined them. "I keep thinking about those signatures, about how easily he manipulated me. I should have read what I was signing, should have asked more questions. He was counting on your trust, that's not your fault. But it's my responsibility. Those soldiers died partly because I was too lazy or too trusting to understand what I was authorizing." The guilt would probably never leave her completely, just as I'd carry the weight of not seeing through Marcus's deception sooner. But guilt without action was just self-indulgence. "Vivian, there's something I wanted to discuss with you. The Fallen Heroes Memorial Fund needs a board of directors. People who understand both the financial and the human cost of what happened." She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "You want me to help manage restitution payments?" "I want you to help ensure that the families of fallen soldiers receive more than just money. They deserve ongoing support, education assistance, healthcare coverage, all the things that money can buy but bureaucracy often prevents. I'd be honored to help." My father cleared his throat. "What about you, Alex? What's next for you?" The question I'd been avoiding for months. The Army had offered me the Intelligence Center command, promotion to Lieutenant General, and a clear path to the Pentagon's highest levels. 6 months ago, I would have accepted without hesitation. "I'm retiring from active duty." Both of them stared at me. "Retiring?" my father asked. "But you're at the peak of your career. After what you've accomplished, exposing this conspiracy, you could write your own ticket." "I've been writing other people's tickets for 15 years, Dad. It's time to write my own." "What will you do?" "Catherine and I are starting a consulting firm. Government accountability, defense contractor oversight, intelligence community reform. We're going to make sure this kind of corruption never happens again." That sounds dangerous. Everything worthwhile is dangerous. But it's necessary. Vivian smiled for the first time in months. "Your mother would be proud of you." The words hit harder than any commendation or medal ever had. "Thank you." We stood together in the memorial corridor, 3 people bonded by shared loss and the difficult work of rebuilding trust. Outside, Washington, D.C. continued its eternal dance of power and ambition, largely indifferent to the small group of individuals trying to honor the dead by serving the living. "There's something else," I said. "I'd like to host family dinners again, real ones, where we talk about things that matter instead of pretending everything's fine." My father's smile was tentative but genuine. "I'd like that, though I have to warn you my conversation skills are pretty rusty. We'll practice." As we walked toward the exit, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't Marcus's conviction or the network's destruction. It was this moment, a family damaged by betrayal, choosing to rebuild based on honesty instead of comfort, truth instead of convenience. The Pentagon's corridors echoed with the footsteps of people carrying the weight of national security on their shoulders. Some would prove worthy of that trust, others would fail spectacularly. But as long as there were people willing to choose honor over profit, service over selfishness, the Republic would endure. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Ready to change the world again?" I looked at my father and stepmother, at the walls covered with names of heroes who'd paid the ultimate price for their principles, at the building where I'd spent the last 6 months proving that justice was still possible in a corrupted system. "Always," I typed back. "Always." Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.